The Four Knights of the Apocalypse, Chapter 107, The Solitary Witch. And the little witch is recognized by the Chaos Knights, Gawain, one of the four Knights of the Apocalypse. However, for them this made no difference, as she was nothing more than a target to be eliminated. And while they attack Gawain, the knights question what she has done with Rosebank. And the girl then asks if they remember the moment when they were ejected from that construction full of holes. And Brakla answers that he remembers that they were thrown out by a strong gust of wind. And to avoid falling, they summoned a beast from purgatory. And Gawain in turn says that he also remembers this very well, for she was there at that moment. And faced with that situation, she had a great idea. Gawain used his magic to swap places with the last knight in the row, so that no one would notice his presence. And it worked, because none of them realized that she had switched places with one of her companions. And shaken, Glennisk asks, "So the real Rosebank?" And Gawain right behind him adds, "What happens to someone who switches places with a person who was in the air?" And she goes on to say, so there are two potential fates for Rosebank: either he died in the fall and became food for the demons, or somehow he survived, with a countless number of broken bones, and only then became food for the demons. Hearing this arouses the fury of Glennisk, who attacks Gawain, saying that he will turn his body into mincemeat. However, our little magician easily escapes the attack unharmed. But the Chaos Knights, moved by an intense hatred, advance altogether against Gawain, saying that even if she is the niece of His Majesty, they will not forgive her. And one of them warns that the enemy is a wizard. So there will always be a break when he conjures a spell. Then they all prepare to make their special attacks, but something strange begins to happen. Their movements simply start to slow down, to the point of almost stopping. Super Slowdown, that was the name of the magic that Gawain cast to drastically reduce the movement of each of them. And according to her, in that state they were now not even capable of defeating a single, simple turtle. Leaving Mortlak quite surprised. Gawain, however, calmly begins to say, "Mortlak, I believe you are an understanding man, so I want to ask you a favor. Tell my uncle not to worry about me from now on." But Mortlak tries to say that it's not too late, and that she can return to Camelot, to the Eternal Kingdom, and ask forgiveness from His Majesty. But in response, Gawain throws his magic at Mortlak, hitting his helmet, which flies away. And Gawain calls what he just said ridiculous, and that it only proves that he is a mediocre man, and she also makes it very clear that she does not bend and does not take orders from anyone. However, Mortlak, now with his face showing, recognizes that they are in fact just ordinary people. But that they all have people they love, and that they fight for them, risking their own lives. But Gawain had no one to love, and that love was something beyond his comprehension. Something she could never understand. For she had no affection for her uncle, who gave her everything, nor even for her father, who raised her. And if this was something that made her exceptional, Mortlak then says he gladly chooses to be an ordinary person. And finally, he then asks Gawain, "What do you have to complain about in a world where there are no problems?" But the girl cannot bear to hear all this, and in an explosive act she says that she feels unsatisfied for not finding the answers she seeks in that world. Who am I? Who are my biological parents? Why am I only interested in women? Why can't I feel affection for others? My uncle may or may not know the answer, but he always shies away from answering. However, they are different, each of them has their own problems, and they are trying to find answers on their own. But before she goes on with her venting, Mortlak finishes by saying what she would probably say, and it's for with these people similar to me, I can find my answers. So it's a journey of self-discovery, long live youth, was Mortlak's conclusion to Gawain's outburst. However, this provokes the fury of Gawain, who believes that Mortlak was only mocking her. But Mortlak manages to do just what he wanted, emotionally destabilize Gawain, who is thus distracted, making himself totally vulnerable to a surprise attack. Tomintal with just one blow erases Gawain. Mortlak quickly moves to hold the small magician who has fallen unconscious. And after all, he then ends by giving Gawain a lifelong veteran's advice. There are many people in the world who do not know what or who they are, and for some people it is better not to know at all. And meanwhile, Percival on the other side had made his decision. The boy uses his magic to heal that knight. And in a few seconds, that knight, who before was almost lifeless, could already stand up. His broken bones, his gasping breath, and the intense pain in every part of his body simply no longer existed. And looking at him, he asks if it was he who healed him, even though he knows that he is his enemy. And Percival, with a smile on his face, answers yes. But Rosebank can't understand why he did it, because it didn't make the slightest sense. But, to the surprise of zero people, Percival also says he doesn't know why. But we know that he only followed his heart. However, on the other hand, the nations were not happy about this. And he makes it very clear to Percival not to blame him, in case his choice generates irreversible consequences. And Percival is at his wit's end. He doesn't even know what to say to the nations. However, in this small moment of distraction, Rosebank runs away from them, leaving without looking back. Leaving Percival in an even worse situation. But at least he didn't attack them. And in fact, that knight was not Percival's main concern at the moment, for the boy was more concerned with the nations, whether or not he was angry with him for the choice he had made. But the worst was yet to come, for upon hearing a scream, Percival as he looks back, he sees that Rosebank has found his sword, or in other words, the fragment of the coffin of eternal darkness. And so that knight leaves hell for heaven in a few minutes. And now Percival's greatest concern was another, for fearing the worst, the boy runs screaming for that knight to return his sword. But aware that he was holding an extremely important object in his hands, Rosebank thanks him, but says he cannot return it, and also calls Percival a fool for having put his own name on the sword. Rosebank suddenly disappears, taking the sword with the piece from the coffin of eternal darkness. And we return to the castle of the King of Demons, where the long-awaited meeting finally takes place, but not exactly as we expected. Well, Shy Tristan said, "It's good to see you again, Uncle Zeldris. I believe you are wondering why we are in the underworld." But before Tristan could tell you the reason, Zeldris interrupted him saying that he already knew the reason, because he had heard the whole story, for the search for the gate that leads to the eternal kingdom. And Tristan, a little more excited, says yes, exactly that. But then Zeldris says, "Well, to be quite honest, I suggest you stay away from him." And the excitement he had suddenly aroused soon disappears. Tristan seems to feel the indifference. And he even exposes this, saying, "It's because I'm Elizabeth's son, and demons don't feel comfortable with the son of a goddess wandering around the kingdom, do they?" And after hearing everything Tristan said, Zeldris just replies, "You are nothing like my brother." But the boy ends up saying that in fact everyone says he is more like his mother. Zeldris, however, says he is not referring to his appearance. But before Zeldris could go on talking about this, Lancelot interrupts him saying, "So, can you tell us why you don't want us to look through the door?" And the king of the underworld then answers, "The problem is the place where it is. For the demon realm is also home to a giant beast, called the Behemoth. And the door to Camelot has appeared somewhere in its back. And worst of all, this beast has awakened. And when the Behemoth was awake, it swallowed all life, even the demons that reside in this world. So, to be very clear, you would never reach the gate alive." an awakened giant that will bring the demon realm to its knees. And the door to the eternal kingdom is on the back of this colossal creature that not even the king of demons and his whole army has been able to stop. Continued in the next chapter, the Beast of Disaster.